The landslide came at 3:12 a.m., sounding like a freight train made of gravel, ego, and karma. By dawn, 5 luxury peak view mansions had been pancaked like flapjacks. The HOA president's palatial estate was gone, reduced to rubble and irony, with a marble lion statue poking out like a gravestone for hubris. And the best part was that she was the one who ordered the mountain blasted to increase resale visibility. I'm Colin Ree, 39 years old, a software engineer, widower, and reluctant resident of Echo Summit Estates, a ritzy mountainside development that prides itself on 3 things: elevation, exclusivity, and enforced uniformity. I moved here for the quiet after my wife passed. Just me, my dog Pixel, and a small A-frame cabin I inherited from my uncle, grandfathered into the neighborhood before the HOA formed. Enter Mara Yates, HOA president, real estate mogul, and a woman who believes nature is tacky unless it's been landscaped. She hated my cabin with a passion that bordered on obsession. She said it broke the visual rhythm of the neighborhood with a tone of disgust usually reserved for finding mold in expensive cheese. But the real feud started when I opposed her plan to dynamite the mountain ridge to make room for 8 Summit View mini-mansions. I told her in a calm, measured voice that the ridge was the only thing holding back a landslide. She told me with condescending sweetness that my attitude was holding back property values. The meeting erupted after that, with board members choosing sides like kids picking teams for dodgeball, except the ball was made of legal threats and passive aggression. Marla didn't just push forward with her mountain mutilation scheme. She celebrated it with the enthusiasm of someone who discovered a loophole in the laws of physics. There were ribbon cuttings with oversized scissors that cost more than most people's monthly car payments. Drone videos set to inspirational music that made destruction look like progress. A sign that read "Progress is greater than pine trees" in letters so large they could be seen from the valley below. She used HOA dues to hire her cousin's unlicensed excavation company, Blasters R Us, a name that should have been the first red flag. No geological survey was conducted. No permits beyond the HOA's own rubber-stamped approval were obtained. The cousin, a man named Randy who wore sunglasses at night and called everyone chief, assured us all that he had blown up plenty of things before and they'd all stayed blown up. When I protested at the next HOA meeting, standing up with my folder of geological reports and safety concerns, she said my cabin would be better off buried than seen, her voice dripping with the kind of venom usually reserved for telemarketers during dinner. The room went silent except for the scratching of the secretary's pen and someone's nervous cough. Then came the fines, delivered to my mailbox with the regularity of a vindictive cuckoo clock. Non-conforming structure. The first one read, as if my cabin had suddenly decided to rebel after 60 years of existence. Unpainted fence post followed, referencing a single weathered piece of wood that had more character than Marla's entire McMansion. The crown jewel was dog barking in a tone of aggression, issued because Pixel had sneezed during Marla's property inspection tour. Each fine came with increasingly threatening language about legal action and property liens. I contested them all, which meant attending more HOA meetings than any human should endure. Marla would sit at the head of the table, gavel in hand like a tiny tyrant, dismissing my appeals with phrases like the aesthetic integrity of our community cannot be compromised and individual preferences must yield to collective standards. She also made a public claim at the annual HOA barbecue that my property was at risk of sliding and thus a liability to the entire neighborhood. She said this while standing next to a poster board showing her mountain blasting plans, apparently immune to irony. The other residents nodded along, some out of fear, others out of genuine belief that Marla's vision would increase their property values by 20% as she'd promised. 2 weeks after the blasting, I noticed cracks forming in my driveway, spider webbing across the asphalt like a roadmap of impending doom. The sound of settling earth became a nightly soundtrack, creaks and groans that made Pixel whine and pace. I documented everything with photos and videos, building a file that grew thicker by the day. I emailed Marla with my concerns, attaching photos of the cracks and a report from a structural engineer friend who'd looked at them pro bono. She responded with an auto-reply that read, "Concerns related to geology should be directed to Mother Nature," followed by a smiley face emoji that felt like a slap through the screen. I contacted the county directly, bypassing the HOA entirely. Their geotechnical team came out within 48 hours, 3 serious people with hard hats and clipboards who spent hours examining the blast site. They issued a stop order on all new construction, citing immediate safety concerns and potential catastrophic failure of the slope. Marla shredded it on Facebook Live, telling her 17 followers that government overreach wouldn't stop progress in Echo Summit Estates. But then the rain came, not the gentle spring showers we usually got, but a deluge that seemed personal in its intensity. 3 days of torrential downpour that turned the newly exposed slope, stripped of trees and natural stability, into something resembling chocolate pudding with anxiety issues. The earth began to ooze, a slow-motion disaster that everyone could see coming except Marla, who posted photos of herself in rain boots calling it liquid sunshine. The night it happened, I was awake, watching the storm from my window when I heard it, a rumble that started low and built to a roar. At 3:12 a.m., the earth gave up trying to hold itself together. The sound was indescribable, like the mountain itself was screaming as it let go. I grabbed Pixel and my emergency bag, rushing outside to higher ground behind my cabin. The landslide missed my cabin by less than 30 feet, close enough that I could feel the ground shake and smell the raw earth as tons of mud and rock thundered past. It didn't miss Marla's 6-bedroom monstrosity, which slid 400 yards downhill and disintegrated against the HOA community center like a house of cards meeting a hurricane. The marble lions she'd imported from Italy surfed the mud flow before embedding themselves in what used to be the tennis courts. Of the 5 Summit View homes already built, all were destroyed or condemned within hours. The Johnsons' modern glass cube folded in on itself. The Petersons' faux Tudor cracked in half like a broken cookie. The remaining 3 houses tilted at angles that defied both architecture and common sense, their foundations exposed like broken teeth. News crews showed up within hours, their vans creating a traffic jam on the only access road that hadn't been compromised. The state geologist arrived with a team that immediately cordoned off half the neighborhood. FEMA showed up by noon, their presence turning our exclusive community into something resembling a disaster movie set. 3 separate law firms had representatives on site before dinner, handing out business cards like Halloween candy. And Marla emerged from the wreckage of her home in a muddy bathrobe and pearls, her hair still somehow maintaining its signature bob despite the circumstances. She was yelling about insurance fraud and deep state sabotage with a voice that grew more shrill with each accusation. A news camera caught her claiming the landslide was triggered by environmental extremists who opposed progress, a soundbite that would haunt her in court. The investigation that followed was swift and damning. Turns out, not only was the blasting illegal under state law, it was tied to a series of shady loans Marla had taken out under the HOA's name without proper authorization. The mountain wasn't just moved for views. She'd leveraged the lots as future assets to secure funding for her husband's failed crypto startup, Blockchain Mountain, which had collapsed faster than the actual mountain. Financial records showed she'd been skimming HOA funds for months, disguising personal expenses as community improvements. The $400 flower arrangement at every meeting came from her sister's florist shop at triple the market rate. The landscaping company that charged $10,000 a month was owned by her brother-in-law and consisted of 2 teenagers with a lawnmower. The emergency HOA meeting called to address the disaster was held in the elementary school gym since our community center was now part of the debris field. Marla showed up in a power suit, acting as if nothing had happened, calling the landslide a minor setback in our journey toward excellence. The vote to remove her was unanimous except for her own vote, which she claimed was worth 5 votes according to a bylaw she'd written herself in crayon on a napkin. The HOA voted to dissolve itself temporarily, placing power in the hands of a court-appointed receiver who looked at our finances and actually laughed out loud. The criminal charges came down 2 weeks later like dominoes falling in slow motion. Marla was hit with 17 separate charges that read like a how-to guide for HOA corruption. The list included fraud in the first degree for the unauthorized loans, illegal land alteration under the state's Environmental Protection Act, misappropriation of HOA funds totaling $347,000, reckless endangerment for ignoring geological warnings, destruction of protected wildlife habitat, as the blast zone had included an endangered salamander breeding ground, and my personal favorite, unlawful endangerment via earth-moving equipment, a charge so specific it seemed written just for her. The trial was swift, the evidence overwhelming. Marla's defense attorney, who she'd hired with the last of her hidden HOA funds, tried to argue that she'd been acting in the community's best interest. The prosecutor simply showed photos of the destruction, the financial records, and played her Facebook Live video of her shredding the stop work order while laughing. The jury deliberated for exactly 47 minutes, which included their lunch break. Guilty on all 17 counts. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who'd clearly seen enough, sentenced Marla to 8 years in federal prison for the fraud charges, 3 years for the environmental violations to run concurrently, and ordered her to pay restitution of $2.3 million. Marla's scream when the sentence was read could be heard 3 courtrooms away, a sound of pure disbelief that someone of her standing could face actual consequences.